Today I wanted to talk to you about what is the value of conspiracy theories. That may seem silly. Conspiracy theory is something that you call an idea that you're trying to minimize, you're trying to discount. Uh, that doesn't mean that there's not a lot of worthwhile information provided uh, uh, in the establishment of a conspiracy theory. In other words, people are just looking at all the data and coming to conclusions. And sometimes they come to conclusions that reflect that although they've looked at a lot of data, they have failed to look at everything they need to look at. They may just be trying to, as we're all, I know I'm sometime am guilty, uh, and it's just true on both sides of things. Whenever you're sharing information, if you've got a particular viewpoint, you tend to want to go find the stuff that supports your viewpoint. And the hard thing is looking for the stuff that doesn't necessarily support your viewpoint. In my case, if I was, I'm no longer 25 years old. So I don't have to go looking for things that I don't know about because I've looked at enough stuff over my lifetime to be able to sort of readily see that, there's something fishy about that idea, or there's something lacking here. Or I remember, when I was in graduate school, I learned XYZ, so let me go look at how that relates to this topic, whatever it is. So, Tartaria is what I thought I'd bring up. There's conspiracy theories about Tartaria, and the idea is that Tartaria didn't never existed, because the conspiracy theory that they talk about is that Tartaria was a great, wonderful civilization that was destroyed by mud floods, and these mud floods obviously were something that were planned, or maybe they weren't planned, but they certainly were taken advantage of by the powers that be. And Tartaria has been hidden from us. Well, we've heard that history is written by the victors. Typically, we're talking about the victors of war. But it can just be history is written by whoever has survived, however that works, whether there's been a war or a natural disaster or whatever. Whoever is left gets to write the history. So it's not always as negative or sinister as somebody trying to hide something from you. Maybe they just don't consider certain things essential to be known or thought about. And I think that's the case of this Tartarian conspiracy theory, as they call it. The truth of the matter is, Tartaria, at least what was called Tartaria, existed. And this is an example. Here is what is that? 1587 Urbana Monte's map of the world. Okay? Now, this is a huge map. It's not a little bitty thing just the size of what I'm showing here. This is a very huge map. And this is, in the center of it is the North Pole, and about right here is Tartaria. And Tartaria essentially is about the size of the modern day Russia, right? There are maps of Tartaria that I've seen that just encompasses everything, including China and India. It's calling Tartaria what we call today Asia, the Asian continent. A sort of a lazy map, in my opinion. But there's maps that I've seen. There's a great Tartaria map that I saw that was a 1744 map. And there are references, maps, information about Tartaria in the Encyclopedia Britannica as late as 1771. So what was Tartaria? Well, this is I thought this was a good reference to consider. The darker you go, the more Tartar culture, ethnicity you find. And so you can see right here, that's a huge concentration of Tartar ethnicity in Russia. This is Russia. As we're looking at this, let's see. Here we have, oops, I'm sorry, upside down. Here's China. Here is Mongolia. Here's Kazakhstan. Up here is Finland. Right about somewhere in here is Moscow, right in that area. But you can see that this covers Siberia out there. It doesn't have a lot of anybody. But it doesn't have a great, the lighter the blue, the less there are of the population. But you can see there, it gets pretty dark there in this area. So you can imagine that at the least there was confederations of Tartars and maybe other ethnic groups. Because if you look at the history of that area of the world, there was over the centuries, there has been a great, just significant movement of peoples east and west, north and south. And yes, obviously Tartars are one of the ethnic groups that have lived in that area. And so is this Tartaria, is this a confederation, some kind of kingdom? Clearly the kings would come and go, different confederations would happen. This area of the world certainly has had cultures that had fine art as far as the craftsmanship of it. They certainly had trading post areas, small towns, cities, etc. They've had kings. And so the question is, did they grow into, any of these cities grow into something like Rome or Greece, Athens, or anything like that? And we don't know. Clearly, you don't see a lot of information about that. But there were cultured people, I'm sure, these tribes, many of them would move out of Persia, out of the area that we call Iraq today. They would avoid the Greeks. They would avoid the Romans. They would avoid the Ottomans, whoever. And so groups of people we're getting out of here. We're going north. Or in the case of Attila the Hun and Tamerlane, these people came from the east and came toward the west. So there was this sort of a melting pot area in many ways, but it existed, as at least ethnically existed, and people called it that forever or for a long time. And so you have maybe the reason that we don't call it Tartaria. The reason I never learned of Tartaria, I haven't learned about Tartaria until here recently. But the reason may be that, well, Peter the Great came along in the late 1600s through 1725 to build what we know as modern Russia. And you can see where Peter the Great is not interested in calling everybody Tartars and Mongolians and Lithuanians. He wants to call everybody, hey, we're Russia, right? So you can see where the idea of a Tartaria might not have been promoted from that point forward. And then I saw one resource that it was a CIA resource, supposedly, and it talked about how the Communist Party wanted to wipe out the use of talking about Tartaria. They wanted to call everybody Russians, and again, to unify everybody. So no Tartars. We don't have any ethnic groups that might rebel against the government. We're all Russians. You can see where they would do that. Just the same way as here in the United States. It doesn't do us a whole lot of good. It's nice to have St. Patrick's Day or something like that, where on one day a year you have your festival. There's Scottish festivals, there's Eastern Orthodox festivals and things like that you one day a year, but you don't spend the whole year being Scottish, right? You don't spend the whole year being Italian, right? We're Americans. And so you can see where this could slip away. It doesn't mean it's a conspiracy theory to say that there was a Tartaria. It might be a little bit confusing, but to pretend this area that British people called Tartaria, is a little bit ridiculous to say, oh, it's a conspiracy theory. So my whole point in sharing this kind of stuff is to say, I listen to talking heads all the time. You do too. Unfortunately, we all do. In fact, the people who write television scripts, whether it be for a comedy or be for the news, or for a science program or a history program, so many of these people, clearly to me, don't really know that much themselves. They're just regurgitating what is the official viewpoint. They don't do enough study, in-depth study, to question anything, to give us any nuance of history or science or anything else. So whenever you hear that there's a conspiracy theory about something, my suggestion is that you do your own digging, and you'll find that, yeah, there's some pretty wacky ideas out there. But at the same time, there's information that may open your eyes to what's really going on in the world and who you should be listening to. So as I always say, if you're a praying person, pray. If you're not, think about it.